We've been tracking these events for nearly 2 weeks now, but the reports coming in over the last 24 hours suggest a fundamental shift. Protesters on the ground are convinced that millions are now filling the streets across more than 100 cities. Looking at the sheer scale, would you still categorize this as a protest, or has it evolved into something more?
It has clearly crossed the threshold into an open insurrection. We are no longer seeing just demonstrations. We are seeing the systematic dismantling of local regime authority. In multiple cities, several governors' residences, including the one in Tehran, have been burned to the ground. Police stations and besieged bases are being overrun and set ablaze. This isn't just spontaneous anger, it's an offensive. The regime recognizes this, which is why they've moved past using only the besieged paramilitaries and are now deploying the IRGC's heavy units directly to the streets.
Many analysts are inevitably comparing this to the Green Movement of 2009. Both were massive, but what are the defining differences you're seeing in this uprising?
While the 2009 protests were historic in their scale, this movement is vastly different in its DNA. There are three key pillars making this current uprising far more dangerous for the Ayatollahs. First, there is a level of organization we haven't seen before. Second, the presence of weapons on the streets has turned civil disobedience into urban combat. And third, the technological factor. Even with a total national blackout, the use of smuggled satellite internet terminals has allowed the resistance to maintain a link to the outside world.
So the fear factor has not only shifted, but the protesters have actually adapted to the regime's standard playbook of total isolation and suppression?
Exactly. In 2009, cutting the lines usually meant the end of the movement's coordination. Now, despite the regime plunging the country into silence, the flow of information continues, and the protesters are moving with a tactical purpose that makes this look much more like a revolution in progress than a series of disconnected riots.
Despite the massive scale of the uprising, we've noticed a sudden drop in real-time updates. The regime seems to have activated its digital Iron Curtain. How effective is this total blackout?
It's almost absolute. The Ayatollahs have cut off both the internet and telephone services across the entire country. This is a signature move we've seen before. They plunge the nation into total silence to hide the fact that they are beginning to drown the protests in blood. Most of the videos surfacing today are what we call conserves, footage recorded yesterday or the day before that only just managed to reach the outside world.
Yet, some information is still trickling out. How is the opposition bypassing such a heavy-handed blockade?
They are relying on independent, clandestine channels. Interestingly, the IRGC itself is claiming that the Mossad is assisting the opposition with these secure communication lines. But a more visible factor is the use of smuggled Starlink satellite terminals. These illegal terminals are the only reason we still have any window into what's happening. Without them, the regime would have successfully isolated 85 million people from the global community.
On the other side, the state-run media hasn't gone silent. They are actually quite active in showing footage of the fighting. What's their goal there?
It's a very calculated propaganda move. Official pro-regime outlets are flooding the airwaves with clips of armed clashes and the deaths of their own security officers. They aren't trying to hide the violence anymore. They are trying to legitimize it. Their narrative is that they aren't suppressing a peaceful civil movement, but rather fighting armed vandals and terrorists acting on behalf of the United States. By framing it as a battle against armed insurgents, they give themselves a pretext for even more extreme brutality.
As the conflict intensifies, we are seeing signs of a genuine military escalation. It's no longer just street brawls with batons. We're hearing reports of entire administrative districts and security hubs being wiped out. What is the current status of the regime's infrastructure?
The destruction is widespread and systematic. Multiple governors' residences, including a key residence in Tehran, have been reduced to ashes. Police stations and Basij bases are being targeted and burned across the country. This shift in intensity is likely why the regime has bypassed the Basij paramilitaries and is now deploying core IRGC units to the front lines. They are treating their own cities like occupied territory under siege.
And the resistance is beginning to mirror that military structure, especially in the ethnic regions, isn't it?
Exactly. In Kermanshah, a major Kurdish city of over 1 million people, armed groups have officially announced the formation of assault detachments to fight what they call the Tehran occupation. This is a massive development because Kermanshah is a strategic cultural and demographic hub. We are already seeing the results of this organized resistance. Reports are circulating that an IRGC unit from the Nabi Akram division suffered a devastating defeat during a botched operation in the Deir Deraz district, losing between 10 and 15 soldiers in a single firefight.
That's a significant blow to the IRGC's aura of invincibility. What about the human cost in the capital?
Tehran is where the carnage is at its worst. While confirmed figures across Iran suggest at least 50 dead, the real numbers in the capital are likely much higher. Rumors of 100 to 200 deaths in Tehran alone are beginning to surface. The violence is reaching a gruesome level of eye for an eye. Official state media is even showing footage of Basij members being burned alive by mobs. They are broadcasting these horrors to justify their own shoot-to-kill orders. But it also shows that the population's rage has completely overtaken their fear of the state.
One of the most fascinating and perhaps most dangerous aspects of this uprising is the ethnic composition of Iran itself. We often talk about Iran as a monolithic entity, but the ground reality looks more like a stitched-together empire, much like the former Soviet Union. How is this imperial structure affecting the current rebellion?
You've hit on the regime's greatest existential fear. Persians only make up about 40 to 60% of the population. The rest is a mosaic of powerful ethnic groups with their own histories and grievances. The Azerbaijanis, for example, are a massive bloc, making up anywhere from 20% to 40%. Then you have the Kurds, who number about 10 million, roughly 12% of the country. When these groups move, the very foundations of the state begin to crack.
We've already seen the Kurds taking a militant lead in places like Kermanshah. Is this just about overthrowing a dictator, or is it about something deeper?
For the Kurds, it's clearly about ending what they call the Tehran occupation. The formation of assault detachments in Kermanshah, a city of over 1 million, shows that they aren't just looking for a new government in Tehran. They are looking for autonomy or even independence. But then you look at Balochistan, and the situation becomes even more complex. Despite having some of the most battle-hardened insurgent groups, their level of participation in this specific wave of protests has been surprisingly low.
That seems counterintuitive. Why would Balochistan, a region that is constantly in friction with the IRGC, hold back right now?
It's a matter of cold strategic calculation. The newly formed Front of People's Fighters, which acts as an umbrella for groups like Jaish el-Adal, has officially called for solidarity with the brave Iranians, but they aren't emptying their barracks just yet. The reason is simple. The Balochis aren't interested in a new Iran or a reformed democracy. They want a spring of nations, the total collapse of the empire in the independence of their own land.
So they're essentially waiting for the Persians, Kurds, and Azerbaijanis to exhaust the regime's resources.
Exactly. They're not in a hurry to sacrifice their fighters for the sake of a revolution led by Persian or Kurdish youth, if it only leads to another centralized government in Tehran. Their spokesperson has been clear. They support any movement that weakens the IRGC and makes the Ayatollahs suffer, and they're even open to Persians joining their ranks if they oppose the regime. But their end goal is separatism. They are watching and waiting for the moment the imperial glue finally fails, hoping to walk away from the wreckage as a sovereign nation.
Beyond the physical battles in the streets, there's a massive ideological and diplomatic war unfolding. The rhetoric coming from the Supreme Leader's office has taken a very specific historical turn. What is Khamenei's current narrative regarding the external pressure, specifically from Washington?
Ali Khamenei is trying to project a sense of historical inevitability. In his latest statement, he directly addressed the threats from the U.S., claiming that Donald Trump will be overthrown and cast out, just as the Iranian Shah was during the 1979 Islamic Revolution. It's a desperate attempt to frame the current uprising as nothing more than a foreign-backed plot, comparing today's American leadership to the monarchy they toppled decades ago.
It's ironic that he mentions the Shah because the symbols of the old monarchy seem to be resurfacing with surprising strength among the protesters. We are seeing more references to the Pahlavi era than ever before.
Exactly, and that brings us to the role of Shahzadeh Reza Pahlavi, the exiled crown prince. While he's been in the West for decades, his popularity among certain segments of the opposition has surged. He has recently made a direct appeal to Trump, calling for more active international intervention. But it's important to understand the nuance here. This isn't necessarily a mass movement to restore the monarchy. Pahlavi himself has stated he is ready to lead a transitional government to oversee the building of a secular democracy.
So, for the young Iranians on the streets, most of whom were born long after 1979, what does the prince represent?
For many of them, the appeal to the crown prince is less about wanting a king and more of an appeal to a pre-Ayatollah Iran. It's a symbol of a time when Iran was a modern, globalized state rather than a pariah regime. You can see this in the crowds. Protesters are raising the lion and sun flag and even carrying photos of Reza Pahlavi in neighborhoods like Saadatabad.
How is the regime responding to this specific political threat?
They're terrified of any bridge between the domestic protests and international power. This is why almost half of all official government statements are now focused on the U.S. and Israel. By labeling protesters as vandals working for Washington, Khamenei is trying to consolidate his remaining hardline base. But as the opposition calls for a transitional period and democratic reforms, the regime's 1979-era rhetoric is sounding increasingly hollow to a generation that just wants a future.
To wrap up our coverage of this decisive 48-hour window, we need to look at the geographical map of the resistance. The footage we've managed to see, much of it smuggled out via Starlink or delayed by the blackout, paints a picture of a nation in total revolt. Tehran, as always, is the heart of the fire, but the scale there is reaching staggering proportions.
It truly is. On Andrzej Boulevard in Tehran, reports suggest that several 100,000 people have occupied the streets simultaneously. We're also seeing sustained defiance in the Ekbatan district. The tactics have turned lethal. Protesters are no longer just chanting, they are throwing Molotov cocktails at government buildings. In Sadat Abad, the political dimension is clear, with protesters openly raising portraits of Prince Reza Pahlavi. But the cost in the capital is heavy. Some estimates suggest the death toll there has already climbed into the hundreds.
Moving away from the capital, the provincial cities are showing a level of aggression that seems to have caught the security forces off guard.
Absolutely. In the north, in Tanacaban, Mazandaran, we've seen footage of Basij members being physically overwhelmed and beaten by crowds. In Ramsar, a major police station was burned to the ground, just one of many police posts and Basij hubs destroyed across the country. In Farakhshar, Chaharmal and Bakhtiari, the rage took a symbolic turn as protesters set fire to a religious seminary. Even in Yaz, we saw defiant crowds right up until the moment the internet was completely severed.
The symbolic war is just as intense. We've seen regime icons being systematically targeted.
Yes, and often by the younger generation. In Kermanshah, girls were filmed setting fire to posters of General Soleimani. This happened alongside the heavy military clashes we discussed, specifically in the Deir Daraz district, where the Nabi Akram IRGC unit reportedly lost up to 15 men. Meanwhile, in Hamadan, the lion and sun flag was raised again, signaling a complete break from the Islamic Republic's identity.
And even in cities known for their traditional or religious significance, the streets are packed.
Look at Isfahan. Despite the heavy presence of security forces, the streets are absolutely jam-packed with people. The same goes for the bazaar in Tehran, in various districts where the blackout was intended to stop the crowds but clearly failed. We are even seeing horrific reports of Basij members being burned alive, a grim testament to the level of raw, unfiltered fury that has been building up for years. This isn't just a series of protests anymore, it's a national exorcism of the current regime.